Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the LGBTQ Consortium. My name is Kim Hunt. I'm Executive Director of Affinity Community Services. And for those of you who don't know, Affinity is an organization that focuses on social justice issues. We work with the Black LGBTQ community, queer youth, and allies, and we're housed on the south side of Chicago. Before we get started, I want to remind folks that this is a call-in show, so we would really like to hear from you. The number is 312-738-1060. And today I am so excited about our guest and the topic that we're going to be discussing. So this is the last day of February, otherwise known as Black History Month, and we thought we would share with you some queer Black history. And we're going to be talking to Victor Salvo, who has this fantastic project in Lakeview called, part of it is called the Legacy Walk. We're going to go into that a little bit. And we have a lot of information to share with you about Black LGBT people in history. So before we get started, I'll give you a little information on who Victor is. So Victor is a long-term Chicago activist whose career spans 3 decades. You don't look that old.
Oh, yes, I
do. He is the founder and executive director of the Legacy Project, which manages the Legacy Walk, which I just mentioned a little bit. And it's the world's only outdoor museum dedicated to celebrating the contributions of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people who have made in history and in culture, and the only one in the world here in Chicago, and you guys got to check it out. The Legacy Project Education Initiative uses lesson plans, study guides, multimedia, and field trips to the Legacy Walk to help youth explore historically significant LGBT role models in an effort to boost self-esteem and confront the ignorance which fuels anti-gay bullying. Salvo is a former journalist and avid amateur historian. And I think you've taken that to a new level with this project. He also oversees the biographical research that propels the Legacy Projects through annual nominations, selections, and introductions. He was inducted into the Chicago Gay and Lesbian Hall of Fame in 1998. So welcome, Victor. And we have a caller already. So I want that caller to hold on for just a moment. Let us kind of jump in this a little bit, and then I will take your call. So please be patient. So, Victor, let's talk about this Legacy Project. What motivated you to do this?
It goes back to the March on Washington in 1987 for lesbian and gay civil rights. At the time, it was the first time I had actually gotten involved in politics. I was a much younger man. And it was also the first time the Names Project Gay's Memorial Quilt was on display, and those of us who were there and experienced that for the first time were sort of overcome by this idea that it was a plague that was going to wipe everyone out, yet we didn't actually know who we were ourselves because we had no concept of our own history. And it started me thinking about if we're all killed, who will remember who became before us when we're gone.
Amen.
If we don't know ourselves. So it planted the seed in my head. That was 1987, and it took 25 years, but on the absolute 25th anniversary to the day was the day we actually dedicated the Legacy Walk.
And I was there. That was a phenomenal event.
That was awesome. Wasn't that awesome?
I want to show folks what this looks like, because these are plaques that are actually in the pylons in the Lakeview area. So I know you might have a little difficulty seeing this, but you recognize these pylons in Lakeview, and then the plaques are here. And you should take a moment to actually check those out the next time you're in the Lakeview area on Halstead. So let's take that call now already. Hello? Do we have him? Are you there? Sorry, please call back. We'll keep going. Please call back. We meant to get you on the air, and there's still time. So let's talk about the Legacy Walk, and let's talk about all this whole process for creating this. So this is a nice map of Halstead, and the plaques, the different plaques that are all of these installed?
Those are all installed.
These are all installed. So
good evening. I'm back now.
Oh, hey. Hi. You there? Uh-oh.
Hear me.
Yeah.
Yes.
My comment is this, okay? Recently in the media, we had one person that's going to the NFL, and he's having to be gay, and we had this one active person in the NBA saying he's gay. My comment, what difference does this make? Isn't the most important thing is what skills that he brings to the team, and can he help them win a championship? And it seems like them being gay, it really shouldn't matter with them. You know, it's what they can do in terms of helping that team accomplish their goals and tasks, and seem like they're much more interested in what's happening in the bedroom.
Yeah. That's a great comment, and we'll respond to that off the air, because I think that's runs parallel to what you're doing here with this project, Victor, because to a certain degree it is very important, especially for young people, to know who our
It's
LGBT
about
history.
role models.
Yes,
It's about having role models, historically significant role models.
And then also, these were all very talented people or had a significant role in history at some point. And in many cases, that history has never been highlighted because they may or may not have identified as LGBT.
Well, and even if they did, it was almost universally redacted. So for a lot of folks, I had no idea. I didn't know Barbara Jordan was a lesbian. I was like, well, there was a reason for that.
Right.
She had her own realities in her life that dictated the decisions that she had to make, but hers was a very widely open closet door, and her relationship with her partner Nancy Earl, I think, spanned in excess of 30 years.
30 years, yeah.
There was no attempt to conceal the fact that she was a lesbian, but it was simply not talked about, and that has been the conundrum for LGBT people. It has been simply not talked about, and that has rendered us invisible, and that's a lot of what this project is about, trying to represent.
I love that. So let's take a look at one of the folks who is featured on the Legacy Walk. This
Bayard.
is Bayard Rustin. So tell us about Bayard.
Well, Bayard was an enormously influential civil rights activist who was basically written out of history because he was an openly gay man pretty much from the 1930s through the 1980s, and it was impossible to talk about him without also talking about what happened to him as a result and throughout his career. So he was forced to kind of largely remain to the periphery, and he was just awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Obama. And that was a long time in coming. Of the principal civil rights activists, Bayard was the only one who had not received the Medal of Freedom. And it was a long-fought campaign to make that happen. But Byron was the architect of the 1963 March on Washington. He was Dr. King's mentor. He actually schooled Dr. King in the ways of Gandhi. And the concept of nonviolent civil disobedience was Bayard's. And he taught that to Dr. King.
King didn't start out that way.
King did not start out that way at all. There was actually a lot arguing about that. And he basically in his life sort of, I think, represented or embodied the concept of rainbow politics. And he always spoke openly about who he was, but he was always kind of pushed to the side. And there was actually a period of about 3 years of estrangement between he and Dr. King, and then A. Philip Randolph pulled him back in and said that Bayard was the most organized person that he knew, and he wanted him to organize the March on Washington. And I'm still baffled by that. Every time I have to do anything, I just think about Bayard.
Right?
Bayard doing the March on Washington on 3x5 postcards.
I heard that.
So he was an awesome guy, and he was actually at the March on Washington in '87 and was planning on beginning to speak out finally about LGBT issues, and he died shortly thereafter.
Wow.
So, but his partner Walter Nagel was here in Chicago for the dedication of the plaque.
I got to meet
This
Walter.
is one of the only 2 plaques to Bayard Rustin that exists in the world, and the other one basically just acknowledges his role at the March on Washington. This is certainly the only one with any biographical information on it, and certainly the only one that says he was an openly gay man.
Speaking of that biographical information, how do you figure out what to write about folks?
Well, it's a lot of research. We read a lot of different biographies, and we pull up a lot of stuff that you can find on the web, and we kind of, the process really kind of falls through people make nominations, which they can do online. and certainly our own internal committee is constantly looking at new people. Bayard was somebody that had come onto my radar very early on as one of the earliest people. This project is created for the Bayard Russins of the world, because this is the kind of person that you want kids to look up to and remember. And we go through just basically a process. We write it out, we vet it, we look it up, we go and make sure that we've got all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. We run it past other people. We consult with other historians. We've got a team of about 28 PhD and EDD historians that we consult with on this project.
That's fantastic.
And there's a lot of legwork that goes into the final plaque text that finally gets there. Has gone through 1,000 revisions by the time it gets there. So it's kind of a painstaking process. We're not aligned with an academic institution, but to maintain academic credibility, we have to do what we can to engage as many people from the academic side as possible.
That is wonderful. I wonder too. We know that some of the folks who you're featuring on the walk and who may have been nominated may not have been out in their lives to their families, or have you had anyone
most
contest?
of them. No one has actually contested at all, because everyone is so thoroughly vetted by the time they actually get to us. There's plenty of written material. What we've always posited about this project is that we're not, digging through somebody's underwear drawer looking for secrets. This stuff, these people have been written about a great deal, but the fact is, if somebody writes a book and nobody knows that it's there to read it, then it just becomes a secret again. And we're trying to attack that idea of conspiracy of silence and bring this information forward. I would imagine there are some people that are not happy about it, and maybe the fact that the Legacy Project is not terribly well known is to our advantage in that respect. But we have ample resources to back everything up. So that doesn't mean that there won't be naysayers. A lot of people, sort of like the gentleman who just called, why should it matter? The point is, we're not the ones that made it matter.
Right. Exactly.
The people that have been crucifying us are the ones that made it matter. We're just trying to kind of set the record straight, so as it were, shall we say.
Yeah, I bring that up because, you think about the biographies of folks like Barbara Jordan, and there are others who may be well known in history for the work that they did, but there's still some denial or invisibility by the broader society about the other parts of their lives.
Well,
I guess.
This whole concept of talking about gay people and being out and all this, we have a very a weird perspective of history. The whole concept of being out is only about 70 years old, and it was sort of irrelevant the further in the past you go. And individuals, especially individuals in public life, they had reasons for comporting their lives the way that they did. I always think about Dr. Antonia Pantoja, the Puerto Rican activist who's on the walk also, who came out right before she died, and she just wanted to make sure that people knew she was not embarrassed that she was a lesbian, but that the only reason why she couldn't come out was because she would not have been allowed to do what she had been able to achieve had she been out, but she didn't want to die and have people think that she was embarrassed by it. So, and I think that kind of speaks for all of them. And the truth of the matter is, when you move forward and you're looking back at historic figures, new research is uncovering new things all the time. We get people suggested to us for whom there simply is not enough information to corroborate it, but once you've kind of passed that tipping point, especially if the person would really be a powerful role model for kids, we'll go ahead and we'll do it.
Okay. Let's talk about one of my favorites.
Girl.
Ruth Ellis. Love this one.
I love that picture too.
She was over 100 when that picture was taken, right?
It was done, I think, when they were doing the film, which would have put her just at 100 at that time. Ruth was born in Springfield, Illinois, which a lot of people don't know, and but relocated to Detroit and did her primary activism in Detroit. She was the first woman to own a printing business in Detroit, and the part about her that I love is that her and her partner Celine Babe, I can't remember, Babe Franklin, I think was her last name. They opened their home every Saturday night to LGBT youth of color to come and have a place to hang out, and they called it the gay spot. They basically turned their home into a nightclub, and they did this every Saturday night for 27 years.
Wow.
Because these kids, they couldn't get into the white gay clubs because they were black, and they couldn't get into the black clubs because they were LGBT. So, and she influenced how many generations of people came through her home. You know, she was the subject of we mentioned the documentary by Chicago and Yvonne Wellbon, who also vetted the plaque text for Ruth, and that documentary is called Ruth Ellis at 100. We highly recommend
Absolutely.
it. It's really, really charming. She was a force of nature, and she died at the age of 101, the oldest known living lesbian activist.
Amen.
Yeah, she's awesome.
And there's a center named after her in Detroit, a youth center that I remember we were trying to get here for the dedication of her plaque, and unfortunately one of their young people was killed that day. Right?
That day.
So it's just
Awful.
just horrible. Ruth Ellis is she one of the first films I saw at Reeling, the film festival here in Chicago, LGBTQ film festival, was Ruth Ellis at 100.
Was it really? Wow.
And I was just thought, and I had not been out that long or even aware, and to see this feisty senior citizen just living her life was just such a powerful statement.
We sponsored that film last year, right?
Yes. And this is Ruth's plaque.
Yeah, it's because of the orientation. You can't see her face because it's in shadow almost all the time because of the sunlight.
Yeah. So again, these plaques are on Halstead Street. What are the
southern boundary is just a little bit north of Belmont, and then it goes up to about Grace Street.
Mm-hmm. So I highly encourage people to, maybe not while it's cold, but when it
it's
warms
much more
up,
pleasant
check
when it's
this
warm.
out. There's another caller. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call. First of all, this is a really fascinating presentation. Like, I had no idea about Barbara Jordan. That's really interesting. I had a question in terms of, like, disclosure. I know that your guest was saying that a lot of these people never really disclosed the fact that they were gay or lesbian during their lifetime. And I was just curious, do you think that's because they didn't want people to know, or because the times wouldn't allow for it?
Great question. Thank you. We'll answer that off. Well, you're off the air, okay?
Yeah.
Thank you for calling.
Okay. I think that the real issue is a combination of both. Most all of them were actually very open in their personal life. They didn't keep it a secret unto themselves. All of their friends knew, all their colleagues knew. It was not part of public discourse. It was a career killer for most of these people. But they did not really hide it. There have been a couple of people who have been suggested to us who are known now historically to have been LGBT, but who actually actively and aggressively denied it in their lives. And we don't include them because we really don't want people involved who were embarrassed to be who they were. You know, we can certainly respect, someone, trying to protect their job and all, because the luxury of being out, and many people still aren't, but that is very much a phenomenon of the last maybe even 10 or 15 years for a lot of folks. And if we only talked about people that were actually out and open and acknowledged and completely public about it, this would be a really, really tiny project. Because LGBT people have only survived because they have been forced to conceal evidence of their own existence. So if you're really trying to understand our role in history, you've got to open up your mind and accept, the reality of it. And the truth of it is, a lot of these people have been incredibly biographied since that time. So there's a great deal of information available about it, which there wouldn't have been had they actually been trying to bury their tracks. So.
True. You mentioned role models before, and I know you do a lot of work with schools and youth. Tell us about some of that work.
We are partnered with Illinois Safe Schools Alliance, and we have created what we call the Legacy Project Education Initiative, which is our way of trying to create materials to help people study these folks. So, for instance, everybody who's got a plaque on the Legacy Walk, if you go to our website, we'll put the link up a little bit later, there is a lesson plan, there's multimedia study guides, discussion questions, and a teacher's manual, and several other things that are created to help try and facilitate a discussion, whether or not it's in a GSA setting where kids just want to explore, about somebody, or it's just a kid looking, on their own. We're always thinking about, the child in Oklahoma that doesn't have a GSA, and what can they do to learn about this stuff. The website features over 225 biographies of folks, and we try to package it in a way that for the kids who can actually come to Halstead, we give them a whole day's worth of sort of an immersion in it. And the truth of the matter is, well, first of all, they're kids, right? And secondly, they're on a field trip, so they love that. But it almost doesn't even matter in a way what the plaques say, because of the fact that the plaques exist at all.
True.
And that they can look up and they can see the word lesbian in bronze. And that is profoundly powerful for youth who spend a lot of their lives hiding. And there's no kids on earth that understand the power of the closet than our youth do.
Yeah, yeah. And for you teachers out there, I highly encourage you to check out this website and download some of those materials and bring this into your classroom, because this is American history. So
no, it's world history, actually. It's an international installation.
That's right. We probably only have time for one more, amazingly. This is George Washington Carver. And when you asked me to pick some of the African American folks who have plaques, I wanted to be sure to pick some folks who people just would not know that they were part of the LGBT community. And I think George Washington Carver is certainly one of those people.
Right. As many people know, Carver is largely associated with peanuts for some reason, though that was actually a very small part of his growth. He was really the person who brought the concept of crop rotation into the fore. He was born in slavery and devoted his life, he was a botanist, to helping the South rebuild soil which had been depleted by generations of cotton farming. And so that was why he created the concept of crop rotation, because of the minerals and things that would be left in the soil. His professional collaboration with Austin W. Curtis was also a personal life collaboration, and they were partners for the last several years of Carver's life. And, he was it's interesting because Tuskegee, which is where he was based out of, Carver brought in a lot of money to Tuskegee, but they also lived in terror that anybody would ever actually find out about him, because the rumors about him were so rampant. And when he finally took up residence with Austin W. Curtis, it just sent shockwaves through the campus, but they couldn't get rid of him because he was their biggest source of funding. And but as soon as he died, Curtis was shown the door. And Curtis continued his work and inherited his estate and continued to do his work, but was no longer part of the Tuskegee family. But in his lifetime, Carver was really the most well-known African-American in existence. And he was courted by Henry Ford, Calvin Coolidge, Teddy Roosevelt, FDR, all came to talk to him about his ideas and inventions. And FDR commissioned a memorial to him for $30,000 in Washington. It was the first time a memorial had been erected in Washington for an African American. So,
wow.
And the fact that he was a gay man is a very, very tiny part of his history. And that's what I like to emphasize about what we do, is we're just putting that one sentence back in the biography. It's all we're doing.
Right?
We're not changing his life. We're just adding that one sentence.
Right. It's interesting. I went to school at Iowa State as undergrad, and the math department was in a building named after George Washington Carver.
Interesting.
Yeah, because he spent a lot of time at Iowa State too. Like you said, the peanut was just one piece of his legacy, but he did a lot statistical stuff. Things that led to computers, and
he was brilliant. He was really brilliant.
Wow.
Yeah, he was brilliant.
He had a lot going on.
Yeah.
I want to let people know how to get in contact with you and where to find all this wonderful information. So here is the website for the Legacy Project, www.legacyprojectchicago.org, and the phone number is 312-608-1198, and you can donate your time, donate your treasure, and really help bring more visibility to this wonderful, wonderful project. This is one of my favorite projects in Chicago and in anywhere. I just love this Legacy Walk. So I'm so appreciative that you were able to spend some
I
time
am
with
delighted.
us.
She's my buddy.
Yeah.
She's my buddy. This is so much fun.
And then it happened to be the last day in February, so we got to get some Black history in here, so it's wonderful. So thank you all for those of you who called in and for those of you who are watching. We do this show on the fourth Friday of the month, and next month we are going to be talking about reproductive justice. So until we see you again, stay warm, stay safe, and be good to each other. Thank you.
Bye.